Welcome to the As Yet Unknown podcast. My name's Alex Snyder, your back pocket coach-sultant and connection catalyst. Entrepreneurship is a bit like bungee jumping, a big leap into the unknown, and it can be a lonely, bumpy ride. It's also one of the most empowering and liberating things you can do. Each episode is a dose of fresh perspectives designed to leave you feeling connected to innovative ideas and inspired about growing your business your way. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's have an adventure. Amazing. All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. And Itamar, thank you so much for being here today. I am beyond excited for this conversation because in addition to your incredible testimonials and the wonderful things that Emil, who I got to know you through, had to say about his experience, I myself experienced your coaching methods firsthand last year. And so I know how powerful this stuff is. And what I think is such a standout for me is that people would look at your background, in, Israeli Special Forces, undercover agent, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, top 10 in the world, and they would expect that you drive people to excellence like a drill sergeant. Yeah. But it couldn't be further from the truth. And that is what I think so many people struggle with, is a very black and white perception of the world. You're either soft and kind and nurturing, or you're hard and callous and uncaring. And for me, I think you truly embody caring candor, if I can say that. You're not going to pull a punch. Yeah, you're not going to pull a punch, but it comes from a place of caring, and it's delivered in a way that hits the nail on the head without obliterating it. Your work quite literally supports your clients in achieving the level of vulnerability that is required in order to work through self-awareness and level up exceptionally. So I'm so excited for what you're going to share today. And I would love for you to add on to that and tell people a little bit about yourself.
All right, so first off, thank you for having me, Alex. It's been a while since we've seen each other. It's great to see you again. So a little bit about me. At 18 years old, I was drafted into the most elite unit in the Israeli Special Forces. At age 21, I became the youngest Air Marshal in Israel's history at the time. Like you said, I'm a Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but I was ranked top 10 in the world at the amateur level. This is important to say. I wasn't at the black belt level. I was top 10 at the amateur level. Aside from that, any notable things, I was the head of security for a couple of billionaires, managed assets in the 11-figure range at times. And now what I do is this: I lead coaching programs on mindset and emotional fortitude. And also for the past 5 years, I've been mentored by the head of psychology of the Israeli Mossad. And I think kind of a lot of his teachings and his methodology are why I approach things differently. It's not a drill sergeant, but it's actually, how can we get to the root cause of what's actually holding you back? Not how you can overpower what's holding you back, but how can we dissipate that, or perhaps even resolve it to a point where you don't have to power through anymore? And I think that's what you were alluding to.
Absolutely. I love the way you put things. I've kind of came into your world step by step, and we'll share how people can do that later. But the way that you articulate things and the focus on reducing the drag is it's not the like, how do you make it easy, right? It's not the like 5 easy steps, but it is very clear on what I would consider sustainable change and real change, as opposed to what many of us have, which is temporary change, or moments of energy and progress followed by severe regressions. So we hear about mindset almost daily now. It's part of our vernacular. And just before we jump in, I'm wondering if you can define what we're actually going to talk about today, and maybe debunk some of the common misconceptions or myths in terms of mindset, good versus bad versus effective.
So it's a great question. I kind of take it off from where you started. So you want to have not peak performance followed by a valley. Like, that doesn't help you. Success is a thing that compounds over time. So what you try to optimize for, instead of saying, okay, I want to get myself pumped up, then I'll have this peak and then it'll dip, you want to optimize for sustainable elite performance. That's kind of how I view it. And at the end of the day, mindset is about you being able to take action. It's not just about you feeling good, feeling energized. It's about action. That's a true measurement of it. What's the output of this? Because the thing is, mindset is a very fluffy term, and it gives weight to a lot of fluff because people don't put a measurement on it. Is there an actual output created by you doing this? Does it actually help? If not, then it's just feel good fluff. But if it actually helps you do things in your life, both on an external level or also like on an internal level, then it's actually you're improving your mindset. And I think having that clear measurement of, is this driving positive actions in my life or business or whatever it may be, That's how you know if it's the real stuff or it's just kind of like the feel good stuff that's going on these days. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it may be my background in athletics, but I love the way you describe what you do as like elite and performance based. Even business, we have a saying, what gets measured gets improved, or what gets
Yeah.
measured gets moved. A lot of people feel like they could be doing more with their skill set, which is also how you describe what you do, right? And a lot of people feel stuck or trapped by circumstance, and people want a lot of things. And I think, honestly, the more the world opens up to us, wanting is almost an epidemic because we see so much more than we would have, a few decades ago. And I think we all know that action and decisions is what drives reality and change. And it should be noted that you work with objectively successful entrepreneurs. So,
Yeah.
what are the mechanisms and mechanics that drive sustainable change? And how can people start to think about what they are doing and the decisions that they're making that will truly create their reality?
It's a great question. So let's unbox it a little bit. From the start, what you were saying, I think first off, you need to recognize what's the thing that's holding you back. What's the constraint in your success? And I think what you kind of alluded to was that question that I like to ask is, could somebody else with your exact skill set or worse be achieving more than you currently are? Or do you even know somebody who has your skill set or less and they're achieving more than you? And what that does, it helps people self-identify. Do I actually have a skill set issue that I need to get better? Whatever my business thing is, whether it's managing people, it's building certain things, raising capital, whatever it may be. Is that a skill set deficiency that's holding me back? Or is my skill set good enough, but I'm holding me back? So I think that's really the first thing, to recognize what's going on there. Because if you have the skill set and you also, let's say, have a base level of character where you're taking responsibility for your life, you're not falling into victimhood and all that kind of jazz, you should be achieving a lot. Now, if you're saying I'm looking at someone who's my peer skill set wise, but he's doing a lot more than me, then you probably have a mindset issue or an emotional fortitude issue. Mindset issue means that you're having a hard time when a difficulty arises to see it as an opportunity. Whether it's to differentiate yourself from others because they're going to get frustrated, or differentiate yourself from your previous self and grow and use it as an opportunity to really grow and be the future self you want to be. And finally, there's the emotional fortitude issue. Let's say you have a great skill set, you take responsibility for your life, you're not a victim, you work hard, you put in whatever you need to do. And also when challenges come along, you decide, I'm going to see this as an opportunity. But there's still an insecurity inside of you by going for big things. What will people think? Am I good enough too? Am I worth this? Is this valid for me? All this kind of jazz, that's going to hold you back. And I think if you can identify where you are on that pyramid, it's the first step to saying, okay, what's actually going to help me? What's going to give me the biggest result right now? Following not just like everything about you to do mindset, because that's nonsense. But you got to figure out, is this actually the constraint on my success?
Mm-hmm.
Does that
I
make
love
sense?
that stack. Yeah, super
Yeah.
helpful. That's really, really powerful. I mean, no matter how often we hear, don't worry about what others think, we're literally all programmed to seek acceptance as an evolutionary survival tactic, right? So
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious, in your experience, when you look at that final hurdle around emotional fortitude, is it more people from our past or people in our current sphere that people are kind of basing their decisions on? Or is it 50-50?
It's interesting because sometimes it's either. It's neither. It's not any of those. It's imaginary figures we have in our head. It's this ominous fear of the tribe. Like like you said, a lot of this stuff, so here's the deal. We evolved 100,000 years ago. And 100,000 years ago, we recognized certain patterns that would keep us safe. So, for example, my tribe of 50 people in the savannah all like me, I'll be safe. They don't like me, I'll be outcast on the savannah alone. I'm probably going to die. And we keep that kind of repetition and thought process in our heads. And the problem is that a lot of times we said it is people from our past or people that we know now. Sometimes it's this ominous they. It's like, what will they think about me? Or I can't do this because of what he or she or they might think. And we don't even have a specific person. I was saying, okay, I know Jeff and David and Dana. They're going to say this specific thing about me if I try and I don't make it work.
Right.
It's this ominous fear of the tribe. Now, beyond that, like how you said, is it people from our past or people from our present? It's both. And I think what's really important to do is recognize that, be aware that you are going to feel these feelings, that fear of possible rejection or that you're not good enough or that people will judge you. What you said there is crucial, that the people that get blindsided the most by this stuff are the people that are not willing to accept that they're going to have this feeling there. So they're trying to pretend like, oh, this isn't going to affect me. And then when it inevitably does, because they're a human being, it blindsides them. They're kind of like when you see in an American football, when someone jives to get a ball and he's completely off and he gets smacked really, really hard because he's not prepared for it. And I think that's the crucial thing, because if we can recognize and own the fact that we are human beings and we do have feelings and we're going to feel certain fears and insecurities, then we can start managing that.
Okay. So what's the secret? How do we manage it? How do we make decisions
I think
separate from our omnipresent tribal assumptions?
so. I wouldn't say separate. I think the real goal is making decisions with recognizing that this is going to be a component of your natural decision making matrix. And if you're not aware that, okay, for example, let's say somebody's trying to do JVs, he knows doing a bunch of joint ventures is going to bring his business to the next level. If he's not aware that he has this fear of how people think about me, maybe my business isn't good enough, people aren't going to be impressed, people are going to judge, then every time he goes to take the action of actually reaching out, he won't understand why, but he's going to choose to do something else. That's a much lower level task, like a small thing in his business, or even just procrastinate, watch YouTube, whatever it may be, because he hasn't taken that into consideration. Now, someone who has recognized, like, you know what, there's something inside of me. I know how to do the JVs, for example. I have the skill set, all this, but I'm just not able to pull the trigger. Then you say, why is that? Why am I emotionally afraid of this? You say, you know what, I have a feeling because I'm afraid of rejection. Well, why am I afraid of rejection? Well, I had an experience, let's say, from my past. When I was in high school, I was told to present in front of the whole class, and I didn't prepare, and I wasn't interested in the subject, and I did really bad, and the teacher then scolded me, and everybody made fun of me. And what they don't recognize is that they have an association now to presenting and pitching to people that's from that experience. There's so much context there. And I think the first thing in being able to make a proper decision is understanding all the components that go into your decision-making framework. And trying to ignore the fact that your emotionality is going to come into play, it's dangerous because you're going to get blindsided by it.
Yeah. So everybody's listening, just like when you find yourself procrastinating, when you find yourself maybe constantly picking up your phone or, getting to the end of another week and there's something that you've identified as critical and it hasn't happened, really tapping into what is this, what's underlying this? What do I fear? What do I believe?
I would say, what insecurity are you trying to avoid? That's the biggest question. It's a pokey one. It's hard for people to ask that, especially people that are A-types and they feel like I'm going to go after it. To honestly ask yourself, what insecurity of mine am I trying to avoid? And it's somehow affecting either my business or my personal life, my relationships as well. And the more you can be cued on to your main insecurities and what causes you to do things that don't serve you, again, that awareness, it's more than half the battle. Because you can go into it ahead of time saying, okay, I know this is going to be, I'm about to do this thing that's challenging for me. And I know I'm going to have this feeling along the way. And then when you meet this feeling, you can recognize, you know what, this isn't just a fact or a sign that something's wrong here. I need to back away. This is just a feeling I understand that I'm going to have along the way because I'm a human being, because I've had my past experiences, whatever it may be. And therefore, I don't have to take this as a warning sign. It's just something, a feeling that I'm going to meet along the way, and I'm going to be okay with it. And I'm still going to be able to take the actions. I think when we're not aware emotionally, whenever these feelings flare up and we feel that in our body or whatever it may be, we tell ourselves that something must be wrong here. So let me back away.
Yeah. I
and
love
the
that.
reality is that's probably not the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Like recoding the alarm systems in our body.
Yeah. Just recognizing that some of these alarms are not they're false. They're not valid. They were valid for 100,000 years ago when the risk matrix was very different, and one person possibly judging you would have meant that you could have been ostracized by the tribe and led by yourself, and you would die. Nowadays, people stop themselves from, example, posting content like this because they're like, what if people judge me? It's like, of course people are going to judge you.
Of course.
Out of the millions and millions of people, of course. And I think just accepting that there's going to be some people that are going to judge you, but you can also choose who you actually care about and who you want respect and approval from. It's extremely liberating. And just being aware, I'm going to feel this feeling of judgment, but I'm going to remember who do I care about to actually give me approval and who do I want respect from and who do I not care about. It can help you optimize for the right actions.
I love that point of view. Who do I actually care about? Who am I, aspiring to surround myself with, how will I make decisions based on that?
Yeah. And what I've noticed is that most of the time when we're afraid we're going to fail, we're going to do something like, I'm going to give it my all and I'm possibly going to fail. I'm only going to be concerned of how people think if it's people that are honestly like not highest level of people. Because all the high level people that I know, if they see somebody giving it their all and trying and going for it and failing, they're like, dude, good on you. That's hard to do, but if you keep doing this, you're going to succeed. So it's really about recognizing who do you want and carving that out, intentionally saying, these are the kind of people that I want respect from. Or even, you know what, I just want respect from my future self. I want to take the actions that when I look back at them, I'll be proud of in hindsight.
Right.
I think just having that simple question, like what action will my future self approve of and like appreciate me for having done?
Yeah.
It's a
I
powerful
was having
tool.
a conversation just the other day with someone. I said that. I said, nobody above you is going to pull you down, right? If you
Yeah.
are working hard and you're on the way, people who have been there, who are past you, they will look, they know, they've been through it. People who criticize
Yeah.
are generally people not making the effort, who haven't been through it, who have nothing better to do, frankly.
Well, I look at it from a pragmatic perspective. Like, why is this happening? The reason most of the time these people want to criticize is because they want to justify their shortcomings.
Yeah.
They want to be able to tell themselves, you know what, this didn't work for you. I knew I shouldn't have even tried it. Ha. And I think it's
Love that.
recognized that's where they're coming from. Yeah, it's like that's where they're coming from, and that's what's going on there. Like, that's their stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you make decisions that you'll be proud of in hindsight? How do we assess that? Or maybe an
It's pretty
example.
simple, honestly. Yeah, I can share a story. So the way I learned this was in the military. So as part of the Israeli Special Forces, again, this was when I was there. I don't know what it is now, but at month 6, it's a 20 months training period to be qualified as an operator for when you get recruited. And in month 6, you do what's called the beret walk. You walk 120 kilometers in one night, and then you get your unit's beret. And it's a big ceremonial thing where after that, like the parents actually come into the unit, and it's the only time civilians are actually allowed into the unit's base. And it's a big thing. And we were pretty young recruits then. Obviously, we're only 5.5 months in. And one of our team members, Jiao Jiao, he was limping really, really bad before the walk, for the march. And Jiao Jiao, aside from that, he was a phenomenal athlete and he was a great soldier and just like a great friend. And we all really liked him. But we could tell like he's going to struggle doing the walk. He's going to really hurt himself if he does this. And we brought it up to the officer who still had a lot of distance from us. We were still young recruits. And we said, hey, we don't think Jiao Jiao should do the walk. He's really badly injured. And this is just going to like ruin his feet for the next month or so. He's going to have to recover just from this walk for a month or so. And the officer heard us out and he's like, okay, guys, my decision, Jiao Jiao's doing the walk. If you guys need to help him along, whatever it may be, he's doing the walk. And we were disgruntled about it. We didn't think it was the right decision. We didn't think it was a smart decision. But Jiao Jiao did the walk. And we helped him as much as we could. And he did the walk. And he got to have his ceremony in front of his parents. And it was a big thing for him because his parents came from Ethiopia under very, very challenging conditions. And for them to see their son, like the first Israeli to actually graduate from this kind of program, it was a big, big thing for them, for their entire family.
Of course.
But afterwards, Jiao Jiao indeed, like he had level 3 or 4 shin splints, which basically means he had fractures in his legs when they got it checked. And he had to sit out for about a month and a half afterwards to fully recover from that. To sit out, and he missed out a lot of valuable training. And what we used to have in the unit were Friday meetings. Friday meetings were where we, the soldiers, were allowed to speak openly to the officer and actually challenging him on some things. And in the Friday meeting after Jiao Jiao got his diagnosis, and this was about 2 weeks after the march, the officer saw that we were upset. He's like, what are you upset about? And we were like, we thought you made a mistake about making Jiao Jiao do the walk. Now he's going to be incapacitated for a while. And the officer said, Jiao Jiao, what do you think about this? And Jiao Jiao was like, yeah, man. It's like, I can't walk. Like my feet are broken and I can't walk. And the officer said, okay, let me ask you this, Jiao Jiao. I get that. Now, after the ceremony and your parents were there and you got to have that moment in your life, truthfully, do you regret having done it? And Jiao Jiao was gruntled and he was like, no, I don't regret having done it. He was like, did you enjoy having that moment with your parents? And Jiao Jiao was like, yeah. He was pissed off at him, but he's like, yeah, I actually did enjoy it. And the officer said, exactly, guys. You're right now making decisions based on how you feel in the moment. I'm trying to help you guys learn how to make decisions based on how you would look at it in hindsight. And it was a very powerful lesson because we all realize that, like, now it's decades later, Jojo still has that memory and he's still proud of what he did. And a lot of times, just us asking ourselves in a tough situation, forget about how I feel in the moment, but what will I be proud that I've done in hindsight? We usually know the answer. Like, that's the thing. You ask me, like, how do we know what to do? Usually we just know. We know.
Yeah.
We know there's some, like, the easy path that's more emotionally convenient, and there's a more difficult path that's actually going to get us better results, but is less emotionally convenient. It's usually the most difficult path. If by default you have absolutely no idea, probably choose the most difficult path, because there's something in your emotion that's trying to optimize for ease.
I feel like I've lived my life on that path. but no, it works, right? It does work.
Yeah.
But it also has a lot of moments of discomfort. So I think you're right. choose the less comfortable path. Again, have had
But I
conversations.
think it becomes less comfortable if you understand why you're doing it. And when there's just let's call it a tangible goal of saying, if I do this, then next quarter the revenue will be this or that or whatever it may be. Like, that has some kind of pull into it. But if you're saying, I'm doing this because I want to optimize for the kind of person that I'll be proud to be, it has a much stronger pull. And that's what I said about the mindset, about viewing it as an opportunity. Instead of just saying this is a hard thing, you say this is an opportunity. I don't get to become the person that I want to be, the future person I want to be, without this coming here right now, without this gift for growth. And mindset, it's really a choice about you choosing to see things as opportunities, not just as burdens or as hardships. And when I meet a difficult situation, I try to think about, okay, this is a gift for the future me I want to become. Like, I want to become a better individual for myself, my family, my kiddo, my business, all that kind of jazz. And without these challenges, I don't get to become that individual. I don't get to.
Yeah.
So, like, thank God these are here.
Yeah. I like what you said. There is a certain amount of pull that gets created by maybe the shorter term tangible things, but what you're really talking about is a bigger picture. And it's reminded me that you have a controversial take on motivation. So I'm wondering if you could maybe share on that, because it's another word we hear all the time and something that I think is ingrained, right? Like, you're just not motivated enough. How do you motivate
Yeah.
people?
Seriously, I didn't know my take was controversial. I thought it was different. I didn't think about it as controversial. So I'll put it this way. I think at the end of the day, we talked a lot about, like, mindset is all about taking action. And when you look down at it, I like to break down as an equation. If your motivation or desire is bigger than the level of resistance you're facing, you'll take action. If the level of motivation or desire you have is lesser to or equal to the level of resistance you're facing, you'll be stuck. And when most people fall into this motivation fallacy, they say to themselves, you know what, if I just need more motivation and then I'll take action, I just need to have more motivation, more grit, more alignment, whatever it may be. And I think the reason people naturally fall into this is because when we all got started, entrepreneurship or whatever it may be, when we had to make money, we had to pay bills, regardless of our insecurities, because we had to, we took action. It's kind of that story where you hear about a mom taking a car off her kid. It's because she had to. She can't just do that at the gym every day, but she had to. And what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs, they remember the good old days. When that was happening, they just, like, took action, but then things kind of got good enough. And all of a sudden they didn't have to. And because they didn't have to, all of a sudden there was this kind of this teeter-totter between their insecurities and their drive, and it equaled out. And they're stuck. So they say to themselves, you know what, let me get back to the good old days. I need to up my motivation. That's what's going to save me. And the two ways I see people going about this is either one, like going the more, let's call it softer approach of finding your why, getting realigned, and having this, like, endless well of good feelings, because you get such a strong pull that it'll overcome everything. And the second option is the go harder club. The wake up at 3, 4 a.m., toughen up, push through, listen to an audiobook, get yourself pumped, whatever it may be.
Right.
And the reality is, I think why this is so confusing is because these things do work, but only for a short amount of time. It's like, whether it's a month after the conference, a week after you read the book, a day after the YouTube video, it's like you get a certain high. Your motivation might not be a 10 out of 10 like it used to be, but it will get an 8 out of 10. And if your insecurities are, let's say, at a 5 out of 10, it'll overpower that. And you'll take some action. Like how you said, there's that peak. But what happens is that motivation fades. It's a motivational band-aid. It doesn't last. And then people are back in the sea salt where they're kind of stuck, where their insecurities are equal to their level of motivation, the resistance they're facing. Or it's even worse. because they start feeling bad about themselves. Like, why can't I get myself motivated to do things? What does this mean about me? I'm so frustrated with myself. And that's what happens a lot. And I think, first of all, also, like, please cut me off if there's anything here that doesn't make sense along the way, or anything you want to
No, it
clarify.
makes sense. I'm just taking it all in. I mean, I've
Yeah.
heard some of this before, but I love the way you package things.
Yeah, great. So I think that's the main issue. It's like when people are at a certain position where, so let me rewind a little bit. So first off, if you've ever done one of these two things, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that you're aware that there's something inside you that's not taking action. You're aware it's not a skill deficiency, because you're not saying to yourself, I need to learn more things. You're saying to yourself, I know what to do. I need to get myself to do it. So first off, that's phenomenal, because it means you're problem aware. Like where you are on that hierarchy of elite performance, you're aware, okay, this is a me issue, not a skill issue. So that's the good news. The bad news is, like we said, these things don't last. They give you an up and then they go down. And really, my controversial approach to this is that when people are going through this kind of motivational roller coaster, they have two options. They can really keep riding that motivational roller coaster and go those ups and downs, or they can really aggressively attack the resistance that they're facing. Most people don't focus on that part of the action equation. They only try to up their motivation instead of trying to reduce their resistance, because I think there's a fallacy out there. Like, all entrepreneurs, they're A-types. They like to go aggressively after things. And we have this conception in society right now that in order to remove your internal resistance, all the fears you have, insecurities, it's a healing process. It's a very passive approach. You have to do a decade of therapy or go to an ayahuasca trip or any crystal stuff, whatever it may be. And it's stuff that people don't gel with.
Right.
And because of that, they're saying, okay, you know what? I don't gel with this, but I want to do something. So let me get motivated. But I think if people decide, you know what, I'm going to focus on this resistance and I'm going to reduce it, that's when sustainable elite performance comes in. Because even when they're not super motivated. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, it's almost like motivation ignores the actual issue, right? And ignores the fact that your risk profile changes, right? You mentioned the entrepreneur who like does it because they have to, right? Because that's, you're really up against it. You're risking, bankruptcy or absolute failure or never getting off the ground. And then you get to a point and actually your risk changes, because now your risk changes to not losing what you've built. And that might be what's stopping you from going to the next level, right? So there's this like changing nature of challenges. Obviously, some of them we know are like really big ingrained beliefs, but other ones is going to be different contextual situations that are triggering those beliefs. And motivation just is kind of like a blanket statement that is like, throw some more gas into the tank, but don't worry about the fact that you've got 101 things you don't need in the car creating that drag and burning through that fuel.
Yeah. I think it's let's put it this way. I think a lot of times people, without recognizing it, they don't stop and recognize, okay, what got me here is not what's going to get me there. And how you said, once the situation changes, you also have to change your approach at times, change your strategy, and recognize, you know what, when it was that context, when I was just starting out and I just had to do things, that worked. But now when I don't have to do things, I just want to do things, that's going to require a different approach. And like what you were saying, there's a quote I love by Colin Chapman. He's the head of the Lotus team at F1, and they're multiple time champions. And he said to add speed, add lightness. Subtracting weight makes you faster. Sorry, adding power makes you faster on the straights, but subtracting weight makes you faster everywhere.
Yes.
And I think it's really easy to see that in cars. Like if I tell somebody, hey man, what's the better idea if you want to go faster and further? Hey, in your car, press harder on the gas pedal or put the handbrake down. To be like, put the handbrake down, obviously. Cool. So why don't you do that with yourself? And that's the question. Like we resist doing that with ourselves because, again, I think most people think it has to be this passive thing when it doesn't.
Yeah, I like that. Action oriented. You said that you love his quote. You have sort of a saying around what we need in order to come through in the clinch, or how to. Because I think it's about creating the stability, right? Like I love the word sustainability, and but how do you continue to show up day to day? And a lot of what you say speaks to me from an athletics point of view, which ties to strategy and military. And you say you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the lowest level of your training. Can you expand on that? It's
Yeah.
always stuck with me.
So let's say this. Let's make an assumption here that if you're going to do something really big and really difficult, especially if it's during a time of recession with this extra volatility, whatever it may be, there's going to be an aspect of emotionality there for every human. So here's the deal. If you've never actually tried to recognize what's going on with me emotionally and what are the things that could sway me away from taking the decisions and the actions that will actually serve me in real time, when the money's on the line, so to speak, you're going to fall. You're not going to be able to figure it all out in real time. Like, oh, I'm having this emotion because of this fear, because of this belief, because of this past experience, and I'm aware of it. This is how I can recognize it's starting to affect me, and this is how I can block it off, or this is how I can deal with it and cope with it. That's an extremely difficult thing to do. But if ahead of time you say, you know what, I want to take a certain time to prepare for this so I can understand what are my emotional biases that could drift me away, and I'm going to work on them and resolve them. And again, not over decades, but just figure out what's the 80-20 of the 80-20. Then when you get to a situation where there's high stakes, you won't be a victim because of your emotions, because you've already trained to that level. It's like an athlete, like you said, trying to show up on the day of the race, so to speak, and win. That's naive. Putting in the work ahead of time, then expecting to win, that's more plausible.
Right. Yeah. You do your PRs in the gym and then you hope to come close to them on competition
Yeah,
day.
that's
Yeah.
so well said. Because on the competition day, there's extra components there that you don't usually have. Like there's the added stress, there's the added pressure, there's that time compression where things maybe don't go all your way. And to recognize that you're not all of a sudden going to be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat when time counts. And I think it's naive of people to think, and sometimes also people are like, I just want to be more confident so I can do that. It's like, no, it's about you doing the work so that there's less insecurity. And if you can do that on an emotional level, then even when there are times that are more emotionally volatile, you're prepared for them. And you don't get taken to a place where your actions don't serve you.
Yeah. And I mean, we all know our emotions get the best of us. That's, it's what they're designed to do. But again, a little bit, they haven't evolved to the reality of our current
Yeah.
context. I know you have a few stories, I think, on both sides of that equation around, the times where maybe you haven't had the system in place to support you and other ones where you have actually tapped in and figured out what was holding you back. Do you mind sharing one of those?
Sure. I'll share one from actually the martial arts world. So when I was doing jiu-jitsu, I was competing at the world championship level, and I competed 3 times. And the way the tournaments work, it's a pyramid tournament. So basically, you have around 8 or 10 matches a day. Like you win your match, you advance, you advance, you advance. And I would always do extremely well in the first couple matches, and I would really just have blowouts, shutouts, and really, really good fights, and just be at my best. And then every time when I would get to the quarterfinals, there would be a bit of a pause because they reshift the brackets. And when I got to my quarterfinals match, every single time, I would freeze and I would choke. I would really underperform and I would lose every single time in the quarterfinals. And I wasn't able to understand why. Like my coaches would keep telling me, like, Itamar, there's something in your head because you're crushing until here. And then all of a sudden you're just like tensing up and underperforming. And at the time, I wasn't able to understand it. Like, literally, I would lose at 4 p.m. And at 8 p.m., I would try to find somewhere to go train in LA where the world championships were. They're like, oh, I need more skills, which was the exact wrong thing.
Right.
And after a while, I finally was able to recognize what was going on there. I had a certain insecurity that I needed to validate that I was putting onto this thing. Now, to explain that, I have to go like all the way back to the military. So like I said, I got drafted into the most of the unit when I was 18. And out of the whole country, there's 12 of us basically. And from months 4 to 6, it's what's called advanced unit boot camp. It's literally the hardest part in the whole like military training. It's basically an 8-week hell week. And while I did do well on some aspects like leadership, Krav Maga, and all that, there were some things that were more challenging, like the long runs. And at literally the last week, the last day of advanced unit boot camp, it really started to rain heavy. And when it rained heavy, our officer came into our tent. He was like, guys, get your gear on. We're going to go for a run.
Everyone is picturing every war movie they've seen at this point, like every basic training.
Yeah. So beyond what you picture, it's like it's how you feel. Like the skin on your feet has literally already fallen off. The skin on your midsection has fallen off. Like the gear chafes you so much that we would laugh at each other like, oh, you look like a shawarma, because that's how we would all look. And after 8 weeks of sleep deprivation and not being fed, everyone's just grumpy. Everyone's grumpy. Everyone's cranky, trying to do their best, but like people get very volatile. But anyway, so he said to us to get on our gear. So we get our gear on and we go for the long runs. And the thing that was mentally difficult with these long runs is that we never knew how long they would be. Sometimes we would start, we would go for 2 hours and then be done. Sometimes we would go for 3 hours, we would be finished, we'd put our gear down, they'd be like, guys, put your gear back on, we're going to go for another one. And we'd never know how long these would last. And for me, the long ones were the biggest challenge. And at a certain point during that run, I started to fall back. And the officer came back to me and said, Itamar, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm fine. He's like, Itamar, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. He's like, Itamar, I want to take a rest for a second. Go sit on the truck here, catch your breath, and then rejoin us. I said, no, I'm good. He's like, Itamar, truck's right there. Grab a seat, and then rejoin us. And in a tired haze, I said, okay. And I took a seat on the truck. And as soon as I sat on the truck, I got kicked out of the unit. I didn't have to ring any like ceremonial bell or sign anything. They literally just like the truck took me back to base. And when the officer came, they went to their tent for a second and they came out and said, Itamar, listen, we're kicking you out for self-secession. You seceded to a weakness in your mind and you are not fit to be here. So we're going to basically like drop you out to another special forces unit, which is the one I told the story about Joshua about. But in the meantime, like we'll be in touch. And when that happened, that created a big insecurity inside of me that I thought I wasn't good enough. I'm a quitter. I'm soft and all that kind of jazz. And what I ended up putting us in the world championship without recognizing it, the thought that subconsciously would go on in my head at that quarterfinal level, be like, if I win this match, I medal at the world championships. I'm the first Israeli to medal in the world championships. And the belief I had was that if I medal at the world championships and the first Israeli to do so in a combat sport, then that validates that I'm not soft and I can let go of that insecurity. And because I put so much weight, additional weight on the matches, I underperformed. And for me, it took a while to understand that what was happening. And there's this concept, I don't remember if we ever talked about this. We were talking about the concept of the performance pressure bell curve.
I've definitely talked about like eustress versus de-stress in some of my stuff,
Yeah.
but I think it's related.
Yeah. So for those listening, I'll kind of break it down. So basically, there's a point where you feel a certain amount of pressure and actually causes performance to go up. This is when you're really excited about something. Ooh, I want to win this. I want to do this. But then there's a certain amount of pressure that causes your performance to start tanking. And that's usually when you're afraid of what will happen if I don't succeed? What will happen if I lose? What will people say? It's not like I want to, it's, oh, what if I don't? And that's what happened to me, that because I didn't understand that emotion there and I was putting so much weight on that because of that insecurity, it caused my performance to tank. And that's why we were all coming back to actions that don't serve me. Like my actions weren't in line with what I wanted because I felt so much pressure.
Right.
For me, that was the big thing, to recognize that a lot of times these insecurities that we have, they cause us to put tremendous amount of weight and pressure onto various situations that we don't need to. And that pressure tanks our performance. And then we take actions that don't serve us. So like when we go back to our example, the person reaching out for the JV, like he feels that if somebody says no to him, that's going to be another like nail in the coffin that nobody likes him. So therefore, this simple task of sending out a couple emails to people becomes this emotional burden of, will people not like me? And that's why they don't do it.
Right. I remember the first time I heard this story, and I'll say, like, it still hit me this time.
It still hits me to tell it, I'll be honest.
Yeah. I think it's always difficult. I had to share something on a call earlier today, and I remember, having this moment. And it was a lot was on the line. And it was, I did it and it was crazy because the person on the other side said, wow, thank you for sharing. That was really brave. I didn't expect that. And it was just like the perfect thing I needed to hear. So that was really lovely. The reality is it's not always going to be that way. And you have to kind of do it anyways. I think anyone would agree that, what you're describing both in the military and in, world championship level sports is pretty extreme conditions. But, describing it in the JV is really helpful of, more mundane, which I know they don't feel mundane, but realistically more mundane situations. And I'm just curious if there's any other example, maybe just, I know you have a lot of experience with your clients that people might resonate with how this is showing up.
Let me give it, the JV is usually like at a higher level of business. So I actually figured this out with one specific client when I was working with them. And I knew they had a course, an online course business. it was when I was starting out, they had an online course business. They were doing about $20,000 a month. And from what I understood and what somebody who actually technically knows their business said, like they should be at 80,000 a month. But they have this resistance to sending out sales emails. So I said, okay, let's figure out what's going on here. Why do you feel this way? Like, what is the underlying belief here? And we worked through it, and we got to this place where we understood that they had a background. They were raised Catholic, and there was a lot of stuff around money there. And we realized that they had this belief that if I make a lot of money, then that means I'm greedy. Or if I ask people for more money, then I'm a bad person. Yeah, when we got really to like the core of it, that's where it was coming from. And because he thought that if I make more money, then that means I'm greedy, and greedy people are bad people, then of course they're not going to send out those emails. They don't want to be a bad person. No one wants to feel like I'm a bad person. No. And for them, it was a lot of dispatching this belief system. Like, is this actually true? We didn't say, okay, this is a negative belief. What would a positive belief be? We didn't do that stuff. But we said, is this actually true? This belief that if you make more money, then you're greedy and greedy people are bad, or whatever it may be. And we recognize, you know what? No, like actually, if I make more money, I can also contribute more. They had some charities they were involved in, and I can also like take my partner and retire them because they're in a job they don't want to be in. And I can do this in a way that provides a lot of value to my audience, and it's a win-win. And I think a lot of times just understanding that belief structure and falsifying it is what relieves a lot of that insecurity and that pressure we talk about, the performance pressure bell curve. Like for me, a lot of it is recognizing like I'm not a soft individual. Like everything I've done since then, like in the Air Marshal program and other areas in life, like no one has ever said to me, Itamar, you're soft, except for that one moment when I was 18 after 8 weeks of Hell Week in the most elite unit in the IDF when I was a very young dude.
Right.
Like that was the only time. And that small imprint in time painted my whole picture of the world, of how I see myself.
Yeah. I mean, you were an undercover agent. Finally, you're leading SEAL teams of, objectively hard individuals. Nobody's.
Yeah. And like, but it was, that's the fascinating thing. And I would love it if that could perhaps be an example of someone else. Like we can't let this one moment, one failure, one moment where we had a really heightened emotional state paint our view of the world, of how we are or how the world is. And for me, once I recognized that, that's when I was able to let go of that insecurity, even without needing the medal to validate me. Because I realized, this is not something that I need to be validated. It's just not, it's false.
Wow. Yeah. That's the bigger win, right? Like that really is the bigger win, is to be able to recognize that and move forward. And whether you get the medal or not at that point is, I would say, like arbitrary. I know that's maybe not everyone's opinion in athletics, but what you kind of learn about yourself and what that means for the rest of your life, right? Like that's kind of what I want people to take away from this is it's doing the work to understand what's happened so far so that you get to choose what impacts the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like getting the medal would have been great as far as like that specific vertical of my life, but those implications still would have popped up somewhere else. That insecurity, that fear, but like now because it's dissipated, it's all at the root level. It's all kind of gone away.
Yeah, and many of us want to achieve uncommon results across, many spheres. We might know there's trade-offs, but if we are to envision our future, it's not this one thing and everything else is shit, right? Like we kind of want, the fairy tale in some degree. I think it's just how we're wired to kind of dream. And I guess intellectually we know that means doing uncommon things, but what we've just been described, what you've been talking about is that there are these things that hold us back. So I'm curious, what do we actually need to do to perform under pressure and come out on top? And I think even you over the last few years have had quite a journey and a big transition time. And obviously everyone over the last few years has been under some uncommon conditions. How would you share with people about that?
So I want to break it down to two things. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so
I'm a consultant. If you can make it free, that would be great. But always 3 points.
Yeah, I think here's the deal. Like what you said there is very interesting. That we don't want to just have success in this one thing, but we kind of want to have it all. What I have seen is that people can, for example, suppress their emotion from 9 to 5 and kind of like bottle it all in, create this little pressure cooker and just do what they need to do. And they get successful. Like you've seen a lot of 8-9 figure entrepreneurs that do that, but that comes out somewhere else. That has to be released, and that usually comes out on their health or their relationships or whatever it may be. So I think that's first off something really important to recognize. If you just want to be singular focused and you don't care about anything else, you might be able to get away with it. It's not going to be the most favorable thing, but you might be able to get away with it. However, that will come out in somewhere else in your life. It's like the classic story of the stressed out CEO who's trying to be his best at the office and then takes it out on his partner at home.
Right.
His or her partner at home, whatever it may be. It's like, that's a classic story. So that's first off, I wanted to emphasize what you said. I think it was so important. Now, beyond that, it's like, it's not the sexy answer of like, oh, you just do this magic thing, but you got to do the legwork. You got to do the prep work. There's a saying I love from the book, The Hot Gates. We were given that book at the end of the undercover agent program. It's basically the story. If you've ever seen the movie 300, it's the story behind it. It's a really beautiful story because it's not just about they were so hard, they were so tough. It really talks about the evolution of the warrior and the things they had to do, the gogi, the training process the kids went through, and everything. And a quote there that really stuck out with me is that the supreme accomplishment of the warrior is to perform the commonplace under far from common conditions. And I think at the end of the day, it's like, that's what you want to optimize for. People want you to say, I'm going to be amazing all the time. That's not going to work. It's not realistic. But especially during a time of a recession where everyone's running around like headless chickens and everyone's stressed and everyone's panicked, if you can keep a cool head, you will win. It's really as simple as that. If when everyone's stressed and making bad, emotionally volatile decisions, you can stay calm, you can win. And what's interesting about that also, when you look at the Spartans, like, they trained a lot. They made sure that they gave themselves that opportunity to perform the commonplace under far from common conditions. They didn't just say, you know what, we're going to get ourselves pumped up. We're going to say this mantra before we go to war and everyone's going to be great. That wasn't the deal. Yeah. And I think for most people, especially before this time of recession, if you can do a little bit of the legwork and just the 80-20, figure out, okay, these are the things this is what I want in life. These are the things I need to do in order to get there. So what possible emotional stuff or belief cycles or whatever it may be could be holding me back from doing that or could get in my way, and just figure out, are these things true or not? Just that in of itself is much more than the 80-20 of the 80-20 that will allow you to perform the commonplace or even more under far from common conditions. And if there was one thing I would love for like everyone to take away, is if you just do that, you'll be so far ahead of the game. Mm-hmm. Because people with much higher skill sets than you will be very emotionally volatile. And regardless if they have a 9 out of 10 skill set, they'll only be able to perform at a 3 out of 10. Yeah. And if you even just with your 5 out of 10 skill set can stay calm and cool headed because you know what emotions are going to arise in you and you won't be caught off guard with them, you can win.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's fail to plan to fail, right?
Yeah.
It's on a more emotional, self-awareness journey, which is arguably a little bit harder than mapping out a plan, but is what you need to do to actually execute on that plan consistently, to the degree.
It's part of the plan. Yeah. That's the thing. I think we sometimes fail to recognize that if you just have a strictly logical plan, you're not taking into account a lot of components of you actually being a human being. Mm-hmm. If you had a plan and you were just a computer, awesome. Yeah. But the fact is, you're not taking into account the reality of their environment. You are a human being. You do have emotions. You do have fears. And if you don't recognize that when I'm trying to do from going to point A to point B, I'm going to have this insecurity try to pull me to point C, it's just going to pull you. It's a part of your plan you haven't taken into account. But if you can say, you know what, on the road from A to B, I know I'm going to feel this feeling. And I know I'm going to feel that feeling because I'm going to start saying to myself, oh, maybe this is a bad idea. Oh, maybe I'm not good enough to do this. Or I'm going to feel this pinch in my stomach. Or I'm going to start tensing my knuckles or cracking my knuckles or my jaw, whatever it may be. And then say, oh, wait, I'm having this feeling because I had that past experience, because somebody told me this, or I had this failure, or because I just generally am trying to be a people pleaser. Then I can say, oh, wait, this is that thing that I needed to anticipate for. Great. Now I can see it. And because I can see it, like you said, I can decide not to follow to past C. I can go to P where it's actually I'm going to win.
Right. Yeah. Recognizing it, being able to recognize it. Right. I remember in our program how we worked on that. So I think that's so powerful. There was a question somebody had put, and I'm curious around, is it true is such a powerful thing? And maybe that's just the answer to this, but someone asked, in terms of what we're talking about, mindset, actions, procrastination, how relating that to parenting, and I know you are a parent, how do you suggest that we prepare our younger generation from a young age? And a bit of a left field question, but I'm wondering if you have any advice there.
Yeah. So I would love to talk to this person. They get the context of what they're asking, because that would make that a lot easier. So basically, if the children are procrastinating, is that correct?
I think it was sort of like, how do we prepare our kids to have this self-awareness in order to, have an effective mindset and take action and not procrastinate?
Yeah. So first of all, I think people are not aware this is the thing, that we have emotions that affect our behavior. It's not really talked about. And even just when your kid is, let's say again, we're going off the assumption that this is something that the kid wants to do. Like they really want to excel at something. This isn't some piece of homework that means nothing to them and they really don't want to do it, because that's a whole different subject. But if we're saying this is something the kid is really interested in, like let's say the easy example is a sport, they want to really excel at it, but they're procrastinating on practicing more, whatever it may be, or going for the tryout. So the thing to really ask them is like, why do you feel that way? Why are you not doing this? What's your concern? What's your fear here? What's going on? And I think just actually having that conversation instead of like, why are you not doing it? But in a very supportive way, saying like, what's going on? What are you afraid is going to happen if you don't succeed here? That'll usually flush a lot of things out. And we'll usually hear, well, I'm afraid to try because if I don't succeed, then you'll get mad at me because I didn't do good. Or then the other kids will laugh at me. And the more we can flush that out and say, like, is this really important or is it not? We can go from there. And a lot of times, like what you hear with a lot of parents and kids, like as soon as the parent says, listen, as long as you try, I'll be super proud of you, the kid all of a sudden goes.
Yeah.
It's just that. It's because the kid had this fear of, if I try and I don't do well, will you still love me?
Yeah.
Will you still approve of me? And I think just working with the kids on that, it can go a really long way. But again, it's hard to know without the context of what that person was asking about.
I think that was an amazing answer. I think that probably went beyond what was being asked. And I think it does tie in with, I've seen with my friends and their kids, there is this movement for kids to have words for emotions and to express what they're feeling and recognize and be able to name what they're feeling, that I know, like, I certainly didn't grow up with, and I don't know very many people of my generation that did either. And I think what you're speaking to is taking that just like a step further. I think it's amazing if if even 30% of parents can get working on that, we're going to have a very different next generation.
Can I say something that will probably be a bit controversial as a parent?
Yeah, we're here for it.
Not all feelings are valid excuses. That's also something to remember and also help the kids understand.
Yeah.
It's just because you feel a fear, it doesn't mean it's okay to stop. And I think that's a lot of times what I see in some parenting these days, some like parenting methodologies, that it's like, oh, the kid should only do what they want. If they don't push them too much, because then they're going to have this. Like, you can absolutely help a kid push himself. And I think a big part of that, and this is kids and adults, is explaining to them, stop trying to optimize for confidence. Stop trying to wait until you feel confident. Like, you are going to feel fear. That is a part of life, of growth.
Yeah.
And if we talked a lot about this in the program, you get to choose courage. You have to passively wait to be confident. And that's why this is fool's gold, waiting to take confident action. I think for parents as well, like, it's important for our kids to understand this emotional language, but it's also important to understand that this is not a valid excuse just because you can have a label for something. That you don't have to do it. It's because you feel scared or because I'm an introvert or whatever it may be. If it serves you, you still have to do it, even if it's uncomfortable. The understanding your emotions. Sorry?
I love your controversial opinions because I think that's exactly true. I think just because you feel a fear, it doesn't mean it's okay to stop, is going to be the title I put on this.
Yeah, and it's like, just because you can label something doesn't mean it's an excuse. Because I'm an introvert, or I have a fear of this or a fear of that. It's like, okay, now you know it. Now you won't get blindsided by it. Now you get the opportunity to display courage instead of just waiting passively until you feel confident. Say, okay, I know this is going to be scary. I'm going to put from A to B. I'm going to face this thing, this C, this fear. And not because I'm aware of it, like, I can stiff arm it, so to speak. And I don't have to just get that hit.
Yeah. Now you get to choose, right? You get to choose and you get to decide whether you really want the thing you said you wanted. right? I mean, I
Being,
think,
sorry, I was going to say, like, in the unit, we had a saying, like, you have to decide if you want to be elite. At the end of the day, it's a decision. No one's going to make it for you. You have to decide. And people can provide you all the tools, all the frameworks in the world. But at the end of the day, that responsibility is on yours. Like when we said character at the beginning of that pyramid, character is just taking responsibility for your own life and
yeah,
recognizing that while I can make these things a lot less difficult, I cannot wait for this to just be easy and seamless. That is fool's gold. Like waiting to be until everything feels fully aligned, until I feel fully confident, I'll take confident action. It's fool's gold. It's like you never heard the story growing up about the prince who had his princess kidnapped and there was a monster there. So the prince waited until he was fully confident to tackle the monster. You never heard that. And
just
there's a
waited for the
reason
monster
for
to
it. Courage
die
is a virtue.
of old
Yeah,
age.
it's like courage is the virtue. Courage is always an option you can choose. You can decide to display that virtue. And I think that's a big thing with kids. And like what I'm going to really emphasize with Eitan, with my son, like, hey man, like you're going to feel fear. And that's okay. Know that as long as you're doing the things that you know you should be doing, we are going to love you. We're going to care for you. You always have a place with us. But like, just recognize that just because you feel fear, like it's an opportunity to actually display courage and be the kind of person you want to be. Don't wait to be confident. That's the main thing I would say to parents. Like, don't let your kids fall into that trap that they have to wait to be confident.
Yeah.
Give them the opportunity to display courage and build themselves.
I love that you clarified that. I think absolutely, courage is always an option you can choose. Now I have so many options for titles for this episode. But I love that. And I will say, yeah, that is something I'm seeing with these conversations that, people are having with their kids. It's the ability to recognize and name it and then to question it and to ask, why or what is the worst that would happen? And is this true? Which is, something that you always ask, is this true now? Right? Because when you learn the fear, kind of going back to adults now, you learn the fear, you're probably a kid. Your reality is very different than when you
Yep.
were a kid. And what your survival depends on is very different, but the beliefs, they're ingrained, and so we don't process things necessarily as our current reality would expect us to.
Yeah, we just describe things with that context. We feel this way about these kind of situations without regards to how we are right now, who we are right now, what time of day it is, where we are in our careers, whatever it may be. It's just that.
Wow. What I will say is this work is not for the faint of heart, but once you're through it, there's kind of no going back. You can't unsee your unmet potential or your false beliefs. So it's a journey. If people are interested to learn more about you, Itamar, where can they dip their toe into your world?
So the easiest place, especially if you guys are listening into this, is the Emotional Fortitude podcast. If you go to Apple or Spotify, whatever it may be, just type in the Emotional Fortitude podcast. We break down actual case studies. So I don't like just talking about random subjects. I like saying, hey, this is the client, for example. He was here. He was at point A. This is where their business was. This is what they were doing. These were the things that were holding them back. This is where they are right now. These are the exact steps that worked for this person. Overcoming imposter syndrome, overcoming a fear of failure, overcoming how do you actually get rid of a very powerful but very negative employee, whatever it may be. And so we actually break down and share step-by-step processes. So there are actual mindset workshops disguised as a podcast. So that's first. Other than that, you can go to the website at www.itamarmarani.com, and we have all our links there. There's also a micro course that actually, we talk a lot about fear there and the belief structures that are causing all these resistance. That micro course literally helps you break down the exact beliefs that are holding you back. So you can understand it in a very, very clear lens. Oh, the reason I'm not taking this action that will really serve me is because in my head, I have this story. And then it also takes you through the process of questioning and say, is this story valid or is it not? And the whole point of by the end of this micro course, which I think is only 23, 25 minutes long, is that you have the capacity when you're about to go from, how we said, point A to point B, to say, oh, I know what to expect C is, and I know how to overcome it. And even though I'm going to feel it there, it's actually not going to take me away. Like we all said, like perform the commonplace under far from common conditions. That's the goal of the micro course, to help you do that. And aside from that, all over socials, Itamar Marani on YouTube, same kind of thing.
Awesome. I will make sure to link all of that in the show notes so people can really easily find you. And again, I cannot recommend Itamar's world strongly enough. All of it, his emails, his podcasts, they are workshops disguised as podcasts. I love them. Very, very
Oh, and
digestible.
one more thing.
Yeah.
The podcast, it's under 30 minutes. We try to do that. It's not a meandering 2-hour conversation. It's very high impact, very like 30 minutes. We get it done, and that's it.
That is such a good point, because they're you can get them in one session, in a walk, kind of whatever you're doing. Ideally, if you can take notes, great, but it's still definitely worth it to consume while walking, which is what I often am doing. And you do have your course, The Arena, which is incredibly insightful and powerful. So if you think you could be achieving more, I would recommend go check out Itamar's World, check out what he's doing, what he's putting out. And Itamar, I cannot thank you enough for being here with us and sharing.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. Our goal is to create connections and inspire conversations. So please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with your network if you enjoyed today's episode. Sharing is caring. If you're ready to take your business to the next level and are curious how I can help, click the link in the episode notes to schedule a call. Got questions or topics you want us to discuss? Click the link in the episode notes to share them with us. Your question might even get featured in an upcoming episode. And remember, this podcast is not intended to replace legal, tax, or other kinds of professional advice. Thanks for joining us on this adventure. We'll catch you on the flip side.